Ever notice how some 1980s cartoons looked suspiciously familiar? Like someone took a Saturday morning hit, ran it through a photocopier, and hoped no one would notice? The 80s were the Wild West of animation, every studio chasing that next He-Man, Transformers, or G.I. Joe-sized payday. But some imitators didn't just miss the mark, they crashed and burned spectacularly. Today, we're rewinding to 15 cartoon copycats that tried to cash in and paid the price. Number 15. Turbo Teen, 1984. Imagine Knight Rider meets body horror, but for kids. That's Turbo Teen, the story of a teenager who merges with his sports car after a lab accident. Yes, you heard that right. When Brett gets hot, he literally morphs into a red sports car. The show leaned hard on that gimmick, hoping kids obsessed with transforming vehicles would tune in. ABC wanted its own Transformers and figured, why not fuse human drama with horsepower? But the result was unsettling. The transformations looked more like melty nightmares than super cool action scenes. The plots were paper-thin villains stole gadgets, Brett saved the day, and everyone acted like it was normal for a guy to turn into a Pontiac. Audiences didn't know whether to laugh or hide behind the couch. Critics called it one of the strangest shows ever greenlit for kids' TV. After just 13 episodes, Turbo Teen sputtered out. Even decades later, it survives mostly as a meme, a perfect example of what happens when a network chases trends instead of telling stories. Number 14. Gobots, Challenge of the Gobots, 1984. Before Transformers ruled the toy aisles, there were the Gobots. On paper, it had everything robots that turned into vehicles, epic battles, and a massive toy line from Tonka. But there was one problem. Transformers did it better. Gobots actually premiered a year before Optimus Prime ever rolled out, yet the show looked cheaper, the animation stiffer, and the writing flatter. The heroes, the Guardians, faced off against the villainous renegades, but the names Leader One and Psy-Kill never carried the same magic. Hanna-Barbera produced the series on a tight budget, and it showed. Episodes reused footage constantly, voices sounded robotic in all the wrong ways, and the stories felt recycled from better shows. Once Transformers. The movie hit theaters. The Gobots franchise was toast. Kids jumped ship, toy sales tanked, and even the name Gobot became shorthand for discount version. It's a lesson in timing and quality. Being first doesn't always mean being best. Number 13. Rubik, The Amazing Cube, 1983. Yes, someone made a cartoon about the Rubik's Cube. After the toy craze of the early 80s, ABC and Ruby Spears decided to cash in with Rubik, The Amazing Cube. The plot followed a magical cube who could talk, fly, and help a group of kids solve mysteries. The show was meant to blend adventure with moral lessons, but instead it played like a fever dream. The cube had a high-pitched voice, a glowing face, and the power to fix any problem instantly. It was marketed as part superhero, part mascot, part merchandise magnet. But audiences weren't buying it. Critics joked that the cube was more annoying than amazing, and the animation budget barely matched a cereal commercial. Even Saturday morning loyalists tuned out after a few episodes. By the end of its single season, the cube was scrambled for good. Rubik, The Amazing Cube, is remembered now mostly for how desperate the 80s got to turn any toy into a talking hero. Some ideas just don't have enough sides to work. Number 12. Rambo, The Force of Freedom, 1986. When Rambo hit theaters, it was gritty, violent, and anything but kid-friendly. But in the 80s, studios believed any hit could become a Saturday morning cartoon. Enter Rambo, The Force of Freedom, a bizarre attempt to turn a war veteran haunted by trauma into a children's hero. The animated Rambo fought generic terrorists instead of government corruption, armed with gadgets and moral lessons instead of bullets. Each episode ended with a feel-good message about teamwork or courage, exactly what you expect from a show inspired by First Blood. Produced by Ruby Spears, the series toned everything down but couldn't escape its absurd premise. The violence was sanitized, the stories repetitive, and the pacing dragged. Kids found it dull. Parents found it confusing. The toys didn't sell, the ratings collapsed, and the show vanished after one season. Turning Rambo into a role model might have sounded bold in a boardroom, but on TV, it was a mismatch of tone that even Sylvester Stallone would have shaken his head at. Number 11. The Biscuits, 1983. If you squint, the Biscuits looks suspiciously like the Smurfs. Tiny creatures living together in a forest kingdom, each with a quirky personality and a moral to learn sound familiar? Hanna-Barbera clearly wanted its own blue-free version of the Smurf formula. Instead of mushrooms, the Biscuits lived in a castle. Instead of Gargamel, they faced a bumbling villain named King Max. And instead of a hit, they got a flop. The animation was charming enough, but the writing lacked bite. Every episode followed the same rhythm. Max plots to steal treasure, the Biscuits outwit him, and everyone laughs. Critics accused it of being a lazy clone, and even kids saw through it. By the time the second season was planned, network interest had already evaporated. While the Smurfs marched on for nearly a decade, the Biscuits disappeared into cartoon limbo. It remains a reminder that you can copy the formula, but not the magic. Number 10. Jace and the Wheeled Warriors, 1985. In the toy-crazy jungle of the mid-'80s, Jace and the Wheeled Warriors looked like a surefire hit. It had high-tech vehicles, laser battles, and a brooding hero on a quest to find his missing father. The setup screamed Star Wars meets Transformers. But there was one big issue: it didn't make sense. Mattel designed the toy line first, then told the writers to invent a story around it. The result was a strange mashup of sci-fi fantasy and corporate panic. Jace led a team called the Lightning League against plant-like monsters called the Monster Minds. The animation was slick, and the intro theme was absolute fire, but the writing never clicked. Episodes swung wildly between dark adventure and toy commercial fluff. The show's creator, J. Michael Straczynski, later admitted that studio interference wrecked the tone. Merchandising executives wanted cool designs, not emotional depth. Kids were confused, parents were bored, and toy sales crashed faster than a runaway battle rig. Despite its failure, Jace and the Wheeled Warriors found cult status years later for its creativity and killer soundtrack. Still, it's remembered as the textbook case of how style without story ends up gathering dust on the toy shelf. Number 9. BraveStarr, 1987. What happens when someone tries to turn He-Man into a space cowboy? You get BraveStarr, the last major series from Filmation before the studio folded. Set on a desert planet called New Texas, it followed Marshal BraveStarr, a Native American hero with animal-inspired powers. The show mixed lasers, horses, and moral lessons, lots of moral lessons. Filmation hoped to recreate the success of He-Man by combining Western grit with futuristic gadgets. But by the late 80s, kids were moving on from sword and sorcery heroes. The sci-fi cowboy concept confused audiences, and the toys barely moved off shelves. Worse, Filmation spent heavily on production, believing this would be their next big franchise. Instead, the show's blend of serious social themes and goofy villains alienated both kids and parents. The writing swung between thoughtful and downright awkward, and the pacing couldn't decide whether it was a shootout or a sermon. Despite solid animation and a few daring topics like dealing with peer pressure and courage, BraveStarr just couldn't find its audience. Filmation closed soon after, and the show became its unintentional farewell note. A brave try? Sure, but not a hit. Number 8. Beverly Hills Teens. 1987. Imagine Richie Rich mixed with Saved by the Bell, dipped in glitter and hairspray. That's Beverly Hills Teens, an animated ode to the wealth-obsessed culture of the late 80s. Every episode revolved around designer clothes, limousines, and teenage melodrama in a world where no one had real problems. The show was Jace Entertainment's answer to Gem and the holograms minus the music, charisma, or stakes. The animation sparkled, but the storytelling was shallow. Conflicts revolved around who wore the best outfit or who got invited to the yacht party. The show's moral lessons about friendship and humility felt empty when every scene featured a mansion or a personal butler. While it ran for 40 episodes, it quickly became a cultural punchline. Even kids thought it was ridiculous. Critics called it aspirational fluff, and toy tie-ins never took off. By the time the series ended, it was already being mocked by the same audience it was trying to impress. In the end, Beverly Hills Teens tried to glamorize privilege for kids, but only proved that wealth can't buy good writing. Number 7. Dinosaurs, 1987. Take Transformers, replace robots with dinosaurs, and you've got Dinosaurs. The show's premise sounded wild enough to work. Intelligent dinosaurs from outer space come to Earth to battle their evil counterparts, the Tyrannos. Each side had human partners, cool gadgets, and spaceships shaped like fossilized lizards. It was created by Michael Uslan, the same producer behind Batman, so expectations were sky high. Unfortunately, the execution was prehistoric. The animation was inconsistent, the dialogue clunky, and the tone all over the map. Some episodes leaned into action, others into pure goofiness. The biggest problem? It arrived too late. By 1987, kids were already spoiled by Transformers, Thundercats, and He-Man. Compared to them, Dinosaurs felt like an imitator chasing bones that were already picked clean. The toy line meant to drive the show was canceled before release, leaving the series without a revenue backbone. It ended after one season, leaving fans with only fond memories of its catchy theme song and chaotic energy. Dinosaurs had heart, but not the bite needed to survive in a crowded Saturday morning lineup. Number 6. The Centurions, Power Extreme, 1986. The future is now, promised the Centurions, a show about elite soldiers who fused with high-tech weapon suits to fight evil. It had a bold concept, slick designs, and a dream team of creators including Jack Kirby and Gil Kane. With that talent, it should have been unstoppable. Instead, it malfunctioned. Like G.I. Joe in space armor, the Centurions focused on gadgetry over story. Each episode felt like a tech catalog: new suits, new weapons, new vehicles. The characters were forgettable archetypes: the leader, the muscle, the Joker. The villains, led by Doc Terror, never evolved beyond cartoon cliches. Hanna-Barbera had big plans for the toy line, but the figures were pricey and bulky, making them a hard sell next to Transformers or Mask. Kids liked the visuals, but not enough to commit their allowance. By the end of its 65 episodes, it was clear the series was more about product design than storytelling. It looked powerful, but lacked soul. The Centurions remains a shining symbol of 80s excess, where creative potential was buried under a pile of plastic and marketing hype. Number 5. Sky Commanders, 1987. If you ever dreamed of extreme mountain warfare while zip-lining across radioactive cliffs, Sky Commanders was made for you. Hanna-Barbera launched it during the tail end of the toyetic craze cartoons built to sell action figures, and it showed. The show followed a squad of soldiers battling the evil General Plague across a hazardous region called the High Frontier, where everyone moved using laser grappling hooks and cables. On paper, it sounded awesome. In practice, it was exhausting. Characters zipped around non-stop, spouting military jargon while the plot dangled somewhere below them. The animation was decent, but the pacing was dizzying half the time. You couldn't tell who was attacking whom. The toy tie-in by Kenner was innovative, featuring real zipline accessories, but kids didn't bite. There were too many characters, too many gadgets, and too little personality. It felt like G.I. Joe on caffeine, big, loud, and strangely hollow. Only 13 episodes aired before it vanished from TV schedules. Still, the theme song slapped, and the visuals screamed Saturday morning energy. But Sky Commanders proved once again that even the highest concept can crash when the storytelling never leaves the launch pad. Number 4. COPS, Central Organization of Police Specialists. 1988. In a world obsessed with Transformers and G.I. Joe, COPS tried to blend both police officers with cybernetic gear-fighting crime in the far future. The setting? Empire City, where high-tech cops battled cartoon crooks like Big Boss and Buttons McBoom Boom. Each officer had a gimmick, a robot arm, a bionic leg, or a sonic gun. It was slick, stylish, and totally out of touch. The problem wasn't the concept, it was the timing. By 1988, the market for militarized hero teams was fading. Parents were pushing back on violence in kids' shows, and COPS hit the air just as networks were sanitizing content. The animation from DIC was solid, and the character designs looked great on lunchboxes, but it couldn't escape controversy. Many stations refused to air it due to the title alone. It was quickly rebranded CyberCops in reruns, but by then, the damage was done. Toy sales sputtered, and the series quietly disappeared after one season. Ironically, it wasn't a bad show, just born at the wrong moment. COPS had the potential to be a cyberpunk hit, but it got handcuffed by public perception. Number 3. Pole Position, 1984. Imagine if Knight Rider met Speed Racer, then add a brother-sister duo and talking supercars. That's Pole Position, an action cartoon that raced straight into the wall of mediocrity. Produced by Daxi and licensed from the Namco video game, it tried to blend stunts, spy work, and family drama into one turbocharged package. The stars, Dan and Tess Darrett, performed daring missions for a government agency while competing in stunt shows. Their cars, Roadie and Wheels, were basically sassier versions of Kit from Knight Rider, loaded with personality but lacking purpose. The problem? It never decided what it wanted to be. Sometimes it was about racing, sometimes espionage, sometimes moral lessons. The animation was decent, but the writing had zero traction. Even the video game tie-in didn't match the story. It was just a generic racer with no spy plot. After only 13 episodes, Pole Position ran out of gas. It wasn't terrible, just painfully average. Today, it survives mainly as a footnote in the long list of shows that tried to copy Knight Rider's magic and ended up stalling in the pit lane. Number 2. The Karate Kommandos, 1986. When networks realized kids loved martial arts, they went all in. But the Karate Kommandos might have been the strangest attempt of all. Starring a cartoon version of real-life action hero Chuck Norris, the show followed him and his team of specialists battling the Evil Claw and his ninjas. Every episode started with live-action Chuck delivering a lesson, followed by a wild animated adventure. It had everything kids liked, gadgets, kicks, explosions, but none of it made sense. The animation was rushed, the villains ridiculous, and Chuck's animated double was so serious it looped back to funny. It tried to blend G.I. Joe's team format with ninja mystique, but ended up feeling like a PSA in karate pajamas. Ruby Spears made only 5 episodes before the project was quietly shelved. The toy line barely launched, and critics dismissed it as a transparent cash grab. Still, it's an incredible time capsule of 80s hubris, a reminder that even real-world heroes couldn't save a cartoon without a heartbeat. The Karate Kommandos remains legendary in one way. It's one of the shortest-lived action cartoons ever made. Sometimes even roundhouse kicks can't beat bad writing. Number 1. The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers, 1986. Now here's a case study in overambition. The Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers was meant to rival Star Wars and Voltron in scope a space western about cyber-enhanced lawmen patrolling the galaxy. It had dazzling animation, catchy music, and surprisingly complex storylines for a kids' show. On paper, it should have been unstoppable, but timing and tone doomed it. Debuting amid a flood of sci-fi cartoons, it struggled to find a core audience. Too serious for younger kids, too earnest for older teens, it lived in a weird no-man's land. The show's production values were excellent, co-produced by Japanese studio TMS, but the writing leaned heavy on mature themes like sacrifice, duty, and loss. Toy makers expected it to dominate the shelves, but sales were modest. The characters lacked the iconic hook of He-Man or Optimus Prime. Without merchandising power, the show couldn't sustain itself. Still, Galaxy Rangers earned critical respect later for trying to push animation forward. It dared to be smart when most shows were selling toys. Sadly, in the 80s, daring didn't pay the bills. So there, you have it, 15 cartoon copycats that reached for glory and fell flat on their animated faces. From Talking Cubes to Cybercops, every show on this list tried to ride someone else's wave and ended up lost in the Saturday morning surf. Which one do you remember watching or pretending you didn't? Drop your answer in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more forgotten gems and glorious disasters from the wildest decade in animation.